It's my pleasure to be here, and I would like to start first of all, before saying anything else, just with a short prayer. Okay, I do this prayer anywhere I go. It doesn't matter if it is in a hospital, if it is in a school, if it is in a temple. It doesn't matter where I am. And this prayer that I do is basically through which I remember my teachers, my masters, and the masters of my masters. Is a way of gratitude towards them. Because if there is anything that I can say here today, if there is anything that I can share, it's because I have received it first. So I just like to have gratitude towards those that have taught me, and I will start with this short prayer, okay? The first part of the prayer is in Tibetan, the second part is in Sanskrit actually, okay? Ocho sambo bagyo trashi pa tuche tempe trile yarmoda peke drolo zambe zebrache pande lame shabla solvade Omo a guru vajradara sumati munisha sanekar uta vardani shribar Varsa manya sarva siddhihum Pakyuke kudan da gelo Pakyuke sundan da genga Pakyuke tudan da geyi Tenyerme çikto jingi alo Makyuke kudan da gelo Makyuke sundan da genga Makyuke tudan da geyi Tenyerme çikto jingelo Om muni muni maha muni Shakya muni soha Okay. As I was saying, it's my pleasure to be here tonight, and my intention is not that of giving a lesson about anything, is not of teaching anything tonight, but is mainly of sharing with you some ideas, some experiences that I think that are beneficial for myself and could be of benefit for you too. Okay? So, I have had personally the experience to grow up in a context very different from the context which we normally know here. I come from Brazil, where I lived until I was 12 in a very normal Brazilian middle-class family, with a family from the side of my father Jewish, from Germany and Austria, from the side of my mother, my grandparents are Christians, from Portugal and Germany originally, and I grew up in Brazil quite normal way, anyhow. But for many reasons, but now it's too long to go into details, and that's not the context even. When I was 5, I met my master, and it changed completely my life, because somehow I fell in love when I was this small kid with a person, which was a role model for myself. And what was very important in my life was to have a role model, which I still have today. But it was wanting to follow this role model that I decided when I was 11, between 11 and 12, I decided to go to study in India. So I followed the life of the monastery in India, and I stayed there in this monastic university, a big monastery, around 4,000 monks. And I stayed there from when I was 12 up to 24. For 12 years I stayed studying there. I was never the best student in my school in Brazil. And I saw that actually I could study well when I really saw the meaning, and I saw that it was meaningful to do that study. When it was just something that I needed to do because I was taught to do, then I was not really doing it so much. So when I went to the monastery, there we needed to study much more than what I was used to. The life in the monastery, in Tibetan monastery, specifically the type of monastery in which I was, which is more like a monastic university, the normal studies is between 10 to 12 hours a day of study, and quite intense. So I went through that process, which luckily I liked it very much. And I stayed there for 12 years. Then after I came to Europe, because my master is living here in Italy, in Europe, so I came to live with him. And in the meantime, I went every year to Tibet for 2-3 months for the past 10 years to conclude my studies, which I concluded there. So this is more or less how come I am here today. Okay. So in this process, I had the opportunity, by knowing our Western way of teaching. I grew up to 12 and I always kept the contact. So I feel myself as being a Westerner, Brazilian. But at the same time, I had the opportunity to grow up also in a complete different context with a very different type of education. Okay? So, and on the other side, as I was explaining this afternoon before, I never meant myself to become a teacher. This was never my idea originally. I never had this idea, I want to teach. But I started to somehow share knowledge and experience with others since a very young age. So when I was 13, I would go together with Lama Gangchen to different congresses and meetings, and he would be the guest of honor, and in the middle of many people, and then he would call me and say, okay, now you say something. And I would ask, what should I talk about? And he said, say whatever you want. And then like this I start sharing with people, and I always had this idea, I said, when I say something, it must be something that it's beneficial for those that are listening. No? And that's what I always try to do. And so for many reasons, it ended up that since many years I passed a great deal of my time actually teaching. Basically, Buddhist philosophy and guiding through this spiritual path, but teaching a lot. So I'd like to share with you today, knowing that many of you are teachers, and a little bit some of my ideas and some of my experiences about teaching. Okay. First of all, I believe that to teach is a very noble profession, something that is very important, because we as human beings, we are very easily influenced by the environment in which we grow, by the people that we meet, by the information that we receive. We are very, very strongly influenced by all of that, all the time. And there is, in Buddhist philosophy, we make the distinction of our mind into two aspects of the mind, which is one part of the mind which is called the spontaneous part of the mind, and there is another part which we call the constructed part of the mind. Okay? Basically, the spontaneous part are aspects which are independent of the education we receive, the informations that we receive, the context in which we grow. Sure, there's some little influence, but not so much. Which is, for example, if we take the people, even though we may change culture, normally people always have anger. There is always jealousy. There is love. There is generosity. There are some deep human qualities, aspects of ourselves that we have, that independent of the culture and the time, they continue the same. That's why very often many Buddhist teachings are very up to date nowadays, because they talk about the fundamental aspects of human beings, which do not change on time. So when we read some texts, like for example the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, which is translated as the guide to the lifestyle of a Bodhisattva. Bodhisattva is an idealistic human being, which is purely altruistic, that lives out of love and compassion for others. And there is this text which is explaining how a person with this intention and these qualities should live. And it's incredibly up to date with the needs and the aspects of what we are and how we think and how we work nowadays. Why? Because it talks about the fundamental aspects of human beings. But the constructed mind which is where mainly we can act many of the time, is constructed by what? The context in which we grow, the culture, the education we receive, the people we meet, and so on. And very, very often, it's through this constructed part of our mind that we build up our own worldview. We build up the paradigm in which we live. We build up the idea that we have of what is happiness. We build up the idea that we have of what should we do in our lives, and so on. No? One thing that has a very strong impact in education, actually, in building education in the sense, one thing that has a very strong impact in building up our worldview, is something that for a long time I never thought about, but I believe are all the small histories, stories that we listen as a kid. So for example, in our culture, this is not in every culture, it's present in many cultures, but not in every culture. There is this idea that I will be happy when I get married and I find the perfect man or the perfect woman. As we call, in Italian there are some saying which we call the enchanted prince or the enchanted princess, when we meet the perfect mate, soulmate, whatever name we like to give to it, you know. And then if we ask, where is this coming from? No? Then look at Walt Disney. When we are small kids, what is taught? After they get married, they lived happily forever. Okay? The problem is that they never show the next chapter. Okay? But what I want to say is that we are all very strongly influenced by also the stories that we listen, that are taught to us since we are very, very small. Because basically all the stories that we listen, the myths that we follow, they are all building up our own worldview. So there is one example which, for me, I always repeat the same example because it was something that really changed my way of seeing some things, and it was very clear to me. Maybe because also of my own view when I was a small kid in relation to that. It's, for example, when we go to kids or to adults, we can ask to ourselves, what's the color for boys and what's the color for girls? Pink and blue, right? So if there is the mother and the father, they are about to have a boy, what color they will make the new room and what color they will buy the clothes for the boy? Blue, most probably. And if they have for the girl, which color they buy? Pink. That's the common way, right? Some of us, we like to do the opposite, so we go the other way around because we don't want to follow the mainstream. But generally speaking, if we ask what's the color for boys, it's blue, and the color for girls is pink, and we ask why? Because that's how it is. Boys are blue and girls are pink. What a stupid question. That's how it is. Actually, it has a cause. And it's a constructed view. Okay? So, when was this view constructed? 1918, United States. 1918 was the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. So until that time, the cloth that the children would wear their clothes were made of was with no much color, was beige. Now when we look like old movies, what is the color that children are dressed in? Some sort of beige, right? Why? Because to dye the cloth was very expensive. So colored dress was something very expensive. So the noble people used to have many colors, the common people not. With the Industrial Revolution, it became much more accessible for everyone to have colored dresses. But what happened was the people, they didn't know which color to buy clothes for their kids. This was not part of their culture. Nobody ever thought. So when it was available, they needed to create the marketing that came together in the business. And they needed to tell us what was the good thing that for us. They need to tell the people what is the right thing for you. So the first marketing campaign about color for children was pink for boys and blue for girls. This came from, they made some study related to the colors itself, in which they said that pink is a more strong color, blue is a more soft color, because not the dark blue is a soft blue, it's the light blue. No? So the light blue is a more soft color, pink is a more strong color, so pink was for the boys and blue was for the girls. Okay. It was also coming a little bit from France, the noble family in France, they used to wear in this way also. Pink was a color for men at the time. But what happened is that they sewed clothes from 1918 to 1920 in this way. But at the time, people were not used as today to buy clothes every 6 months. And what the market required, when they can have a very high capacity of production, people need to throw things away, they need to buy again. So in 1920, they inverted it. And the marketing of 1920 said, pink is for girls and blue is for boys. And from 1920 to 2017, we follow. Okay. Someone, somewhere, made this choice and start giving the information and building up consensus, building up a worldview, and we follow. And like this, there are hundreds and thousands of things that we believe they are just like that, but these are constructed views. So in education, we are part of building the worldview of that person. The stories that we tell, the information that we give, in many ways, is not simply a matter of teaching how to read and write and gaining other information which is useful for life. The most important part in education, from my point of view, is building up a worldview, is creating the paradigm in which the person will live. Because the worldview is something that is very, very strong in us. Okay? So, based on that, one of the first things that we need to do is understand, first of all, that yes, we live within a worldview, and when there is a child being brought up, the child is building up his or her worldview as the child grows up. And all the environment around, it's responsible for that. And the teacher, which interacts a lot with the kid, have a special role in that. So it's not a matter just of, again, giving techniques. It's a matter of building the basis on which that person will live the rest of his or her life. Something quite serious, actually. Yeah. That's why in ancient Asian traditions, the teachers are kept with the highest of the respects. And one of the most important things is to choose correctly your teacher. Because this has a very big impact and a very big influence in ourselves. The example that is given is that the student, in the very beginning, he needs to walk with his own legs, but he's blind. So the teacher is the one taking him in the hands and showing how to walk and saying, okay, here be careful, you need to go down, here it's this way, here's the other path, until he's able to open his own eyes and walk alone and then guide others. But he will walk on the path that is shown to him. Maybe at a certain point in his or her life, they will go through difficulties, many different situations, meet other people, change ideas, because the process to change one's own worldview is not simple and it's not painless. I think many of us, we know about that. At a certain point, we need to start changing what are the certainties, things that before were certainty, we see that they are not so certain, and then we need to start changing our own will. It's a very hard process very often. And then we can guide others on the worldview that we have. Okay? But this first basis that we receive, it's fundamental in the very beginning of our lives. There are some studies which I heard about, and I believe they are very much true, in which it said that the most important age on the education of a person is between 0 and 6 years of age. Because when we talk about the education, it's not just the ability of gaining more concepts and information and technical information. Is it important? Somehow, yes. But going very much to the point, because very much part of the educational system in which we live nowadays, is it based on what? Preparing people to work, right? Why do we go to school? Basically, because we are being prepared to enter into our own work life and for the jobs and so on. And our whole system is made in a way so that the companies, they know what type of people they will get, so they know what are the needs that they have, and based on that there is the precise education for that. Everything is focused on the job finally. Okay? So even if we think we keep into this perspective, okay, which I really do not agree so much, but we just, for one moment, we remain within this perspective. I have talked many times to people from companies, and sometimes even like in an event, talking together with the people responsible for big companies and banks or whatever. And I always make a question, and I always end up getting the same answer. The question is, in a company, what gives more problem to the company? The lack of knowledge and technical understanding from its employees, or the lack of emotional stability? What is the answer?
The second.
The second, the lack of emotional stability. So, if I would be the one to employ someone, I would like to see in the curriculum, I am a patient person, I'm able to relate well to others, I am well connected, I know how to keep my own space and to respect the space of others, I am generous, compassionate. I think, for example, this is something that I think would be very important. I don't know if this ever happens normally. Maybe yes, I hope, but I don't think so much. So what my questions, which was for the companies, was, if the emotional stability is something so important and it is lacking so much, why in the whole educational process it is not taken into consideration? No? We are human beings, we are not robots. We're not computers that are there just to compute data and to follow specific tasks. We integrate, we relate to each other. And in this whole process, there are some aspects which are fundamental, which is how we relate to each other, our emotions, how to grow up as a human being, as a better person. And if we leave this part of education only for the parents, it's not working. Because this is a part of education that normally would be given by religion, it would be given by the parents, hopefully. But what we see nowadays is that with both parents working most of the times, the children are educated at home by television very often. Or not? YouTube, television, whatever. So what happened is that this part of human contact, because one thing which I was talking many years ago with my mother, she's a psychologist, and one thing which she told me, which was one of the main differences that she found between Buddhism and the traditional knowledge of psychology, was that in Buddhism we truly believe and we practice emotional education. We can train ourselves emotionally. We can train ourselves to be more patient, to have more love, to be more generous, to have less anger, less jealousy, less pride, less miserliness. We can train ourselves into all of this and much more. This is possible. And I believe that one of the important parts on education is this human part. And why the first 6 years are so important? Because in the first 6 years of life, in which we are not learning from technical informations and this and that, we learn by example. We learn through experience. From my understanding, is one of the most active periods of the brain. And it's there where we develop the basis of our emotional identity and who we are. And the way how we act emotionally. So, first of all, I believe that education must be done taking into consideration the human being as a whole. And not simply giving the tools for the human being to do a specific task. What I have seen in young people in their early 20s, very often, and I've talked to some teachers, one specific teacher in one university in Genova in Italy, and in other Brazil I made the same question also, it's quite clear. We have now young people nowadays, many, that have very high level of knowledge. Technically, wonderful. So they are very well prepared, they know a lot of things and so on, but very, very unstable emotionally. Where something small happens, the person already enters into anxiety and so many other types of problems. You know? I don't know how is the situation here in Holland, but like in Brazil, for example, the number of people, and young people even more and more, taking psychiatric medicine is growing like crazy. This is something that sincerely worries me very much. Because what is this showing? Many things, but one of them is that more and more people are being taken away of their own ability to deal with conflicts and difficult situations. Because let's put how things are. Life is not easy. It's beautiful, but it's not easy. No? There's one thought which I have been saying these days, which came to my mind not long ago. I was saying, okay, is childhood easy? No. If we remember our childhood, you know, starting to learn things and understand better who we are, what we can do, what we cannot do, how is to fit in society, it's not easy. So childhood is not easy. Being a teenager, is it easy? No. Entering adulthood and starting to find a job and what job I will do, and then we start to enter a job, and then relationships, and then building up a family or not building up a family, and how I do for my livelihood and this and that. Is that part easy?
No.
No. Following up this part and keeping life and so on is also not easy. Retirement is easy. Much less in a world that does not respect the old people. Is dying easy? No. Also being born is not easy. Okay, so finally, is life easy? Not. I believe life is very beautiful. But it's not easy, and it has never been easy. And I do not ever think it will be something easy. But in this whole process, we need to have the tools to deal with the difficulties of life. And there are many tools that can help us to deal with the difficulties of life in a much easier way. And this process of always taking medicine and so on, which in some cases I do agree, but are very specific. I had long discussions with one psychiatrist one time about who truly commands. Who is the boss really? The mind or the body?
Body.
No. And the conclusion was, if the boss is the body, this means that we can create a perfect chemical balance, and then the person will always be happy. Is it this possible? No. What happened talking to this friend, this psychiatrist, he was saying, look, when the person is in a certain state, we give the medicine, this will help the person to be better, but if the person do not follow a psychological process and a change in his lifestyle, things will just go back as before and need to give more and more medicine at some point. So what was the conclusion? If you change the mind, the body will follow. If you change only the body, after some time, you will need to change even more in order for the mind to follow. You can push the mind up to a certain point, but not much more than that. So, the interesting thing is that we all have very powerful tools to deal with the difficulties of life. We do have these tools. They have been there for centuries, for thousands of years there. But we need to learn them. We need to train ourselves into these tools. Otherwise, when the first difficulty comes, we run away and we try to ask for help and we don't know what to do. So, in the whole process of education, I believe that these two parts are important. One is we learn how to learn. Because one of the things when I was a small kid that I really didn't understand was, why did I need to study all of that? And I was complaining, I don't like to study this and that. When it was a subject that I really liked, I was quite good in it, but otherwise I really was not putting much effort into it. Then was a Christian priest, a friend from Australia, teacher of phenomenology, who taught me why we study all of that. And he said the main function in the school is not to gain knowledge, but is to learn how to learn. He said most of the things that we learn maybe after are not really useful, but we learn how to learn. We train ourselves in the process of learning and getting new knowledge and getting new experiences and so on, and based on that, after we can choose truly what we need and what is the direction that we go. But we need to train ourselves to learn. So this is one part of the process of education. Okay? The other part, which is fundamental, and it's a bit more difficult actually, is building up one's own worldview and developing the inner tools to deal with the difficulties of life from an emotional perspective. Okay? Now, how do we do all of that? Something which is very strong in Buddhism, it is that it is said that those that teach, in order to be able to teach, must first, how to say in English, master what they want to teach. I cannot teach something that I truly do not understand. So the process of learning, according to Tibetan Buddhism, is based on three parts. Okay. The process of learning is based on listening, according to Tibetan, NgalSo, which is to listen, to comprehend, and to familiarize or meditate. The same word in Tibetan. Okay, we can use familiarize. So what is the first step? Listening means gathering information. I can do that by reading, I can do that by physically listening, but it's when I receive information. That's the first step. Second step, comprehension, is when I start to check if that information is valid or not valid. Is when I start to analyze and discuss, and I go through the whole process of understanding until that information is not something that I'm going to repeat that someone else said, but it becomes my own understanding. That's very important. Because very often what we do, we repeat what someone else told us. Okay, this is like this, that is like that. Why? Oh, because that was what I was taught when I was in university. or because this is what it is said by that great scholar or by that other great scholar, they said this and the other one said that. Okay, wonderful, but what do you think? What's the conclusion that you reach? If they change idea, would you change idea also or not? Let's say there is a great scholar, he says something, it looks very nice, and we start following that. And at a certain point he becomes a bit cuckoo. He goes out of his mind and he starts saying the opposite. What will we do? We follow him because he's the great scholar? Or we follow our own logics and understanding and experience, and we follow what we believe based on our own understanding? That would be the better way. But in order to do that, we must check. We must go through the process of deeper understanding or comprehension. Okay? Which is not so simple. Okay? We do that in the in-Eastern education, like the monastery where I was educated. The education is made like that. This is not all monasteries, but there are 4 monasteries which education is like that mainly. Nowadays it's growing a little bit the system, but originally 4 main monasteries in central Tibet, and which are the great monastic universities. I would have more or less every day no more than 2 hours of lessons. Okay. First thing, we choose our own teacher. 4,000 monks, I can choose anyone as a teacher. Why? Because it's fundamental to have a relationship of trust with our teacher. So as teachers, I know that most of your students will not choose you out. It's not that you go to school and there are many teachers and you can choose which teacher you like to go with, right? There are the teachers, they are there, and then we just need to follow. But it's very important for you as teachers to create a relationship of trust with the students. Trust is based on love. Love is the wish for the other to be happy. That's what love is about. It's like friendship. You know? The word friendship, originally in Latin, if we look, for example, in the Latin languages, it has the same etymology like the word friendship in Sanskrit, which is mitra in Sanskrit, which mitra is coming from maitri. Maitri means love. So friend is the one that loves you, the ones for whom your happiness is important. And if we look, amicizia in Italian is coming from amore, coming from amare, which means to love also. So coming from the Latin, also the etymology from Latin is also bringing the same root, which is, who is my friend? The one that loves me. And me as a teacher, I must love my student. To love means his happiness is important for me. This is what it means to love. I love you, your happiness is important for me. I wish you to be happy. And I will do what I can do in order for you to be happy. This is the basis, because the basis of trust is I trust you in the sense that I trust that you will care for me. And you will be on my side whenever I may need. And you will be correct. So, it's very important to create this relationship of trust. But in order to create a relationship of trust, we must be able to see each other. We must be able to look at each other's eyes and really see the other person. And be there present for the other person. So, to be a teacher is not something for anyone. Because it requires a beautiful heart. To be there, to care, independently of what type of teacher we may be. Okay? But it's something really, really very important. So first step, we need to create this bond, we need to create this connection with the student, which is based on trust. When we gain the trust of the student, then we can direct the student any way we wish. That's why it's so important to choose a right teacher. Okay? Then, so in the monastery we would choose our own teachers, and we had a relationship of a lot of respect. For example, one time I went to give a speech in the university where my sister was studying in Brazil, and I was shocked. I entered the classroom, the poor teacher was there trying to explain something, and all the kids were around their 17, 18 years old. They were all talking, going in and out of the classroom and this and that, and I said, come on, how that's possible? I was living in the monastery at the time. And I was used that when I go to see my teacher, we bow down, we enter the room silently. When the class finishes, we stand up, we never give our back to the teacher, we go out without giving the back. No? Okay, that's a little bit maybe too much for our society. But that's what I was used to. Then I got there, that big chaos, the teacher trying to... Then I remember entering that room with all these kids. And I just start to look to them and wait them to be silent. It could have taken forever, but luckily it was not so long. And then start changing. No? But what happened is that we must have this bond. We must create this connection to each other. Okay? And one thing which is very important is for the student to feel that you care for him. It's not only to feel, we really need to care for him. That's the most important thing. So in the monastery, we choose our own teachers. We have around 2 hours a day of lessons. And there are days that there are no lessons. Because each one of us will make our own schedule, because we choose who are our teachers. Some teachers will teach every day, other teachers will not. And okay, in the monastery we have one only teacher for all the subjects. So we could have 2, 3 teachers, also because we study one subject at a time. We don't have all the subjects together. And one very nice thing is that all the subjects, they mixed with each other. So the subject that I studied in the beginning, in the first year, I'm still going to use it when I am in the 10th year. So this helps a lot. This remembers me a little bit one school I went in Brazil last year. I went to because of a friend and so on. And this is a very wealthy Brazilian man that has made very successful with business and so on. So he went to live outside of this city. And he wanted his kids to go really to a very good school. And what happened, his name is Ricardo Semler. And what happened is that he created a school that he wanted his kids to go to. Because there was no such a school where he went. I know very well because we have a temple. We are building a temple that we are neighbor to him. That's how we know each other. So what he did, he built up his own school. Very simple externally. And he applied the techniques, what he thought was the best. His kids are studying there and also open for the community around. And they study in a very different way, which is the following. They don't have subjects. The classrooms are with mixed ages. So what happens is that all the kids normally, unless they're in the first year, they learn with the teacher, but they also learn from the kids that are older, and they teach to the youngers. So at a certain point, all the kids, they need to study, they need to teach, they need to help other kids also together. But the interesting thing is that the whole system of education is based on projects. So the kids gather together and they say, what's the next project we like to do? And together with one guiding teacher, they decide the project. And for that project, who do we need to call to teach us how to do that and to learn about that? Then they will call who they call the masters, an expert in this subject, an expert on that subject, and they will go, and then together with that they will learn the geography, the mathematics necessary for that, and they will learn everything necessary to do that project. When one project is completed, then they open another project. And it was very interesting is that they study in this way, and they give the national exams, and they have very high marks on the normal exams that are there, when they never had a mathematics class. But they study because mathematics is part of life. So they are studied when it's necessary according to the needs and so on. So this is called the Luminar. This is this school. Anyhow, this just came to my mind because it's something a little bit more similar. Okay. So in the monastery, we have our teachers. We go to the lessons. We need to do a lot of memorization because what we do is that it's part of our nature to forget things, right? We learn something, after some time we forget about it. So we have always texts which are like the essence, made it in verses, and they are like the essence of what we are studying. So what we do is we memorize this text word by word. So if you go to a Tibetan monastery early in the morning, you will see all the monks there that are studying, from the very young ones to the very old ones that are still studying, just shouting around. Shouting in the sense they take the text and you just repeat the same thing until it enters into your mind, basically. No? So they are there. Sangye Jada, Sangye Jada, Sangye Jada, Sangye Jada, Sangye Jada, and the movement helps also actually. Sangye Jada, Tsoge Chanamla, Sangye Jada, until it enters. And then in the evening you need to repeat everything that you memorized, accumulated day by day. And the minimum that a monk memorizes every day, since young age, the minimum is 4 lines a day. Which, like, just translated like one prayer that we do is, in the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha I take refuge unto enlightenment. Through the practice of generosity and other perfections, may I reach Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Just making one prayer in English translation. It's like the minimum amount what a person should memorize every day. But it's very common. Like one monk in my class, he was another Lama, he would memorize 1,500 pages a year. And then we have the exam of memorization, and later the minimum that we need to memorize a year is around 100 pages a year. That's the minimum. So there is a part of training which is very technical, in which you need to go down and need to memorize and need to train, and it's interesting, the more we use that part of the mind, the easier it becomes. Okay? So we memorize mainly the texts which are like the essence of what we are going to learn. And normally when we memorize, we have no idea what we are memorizing. We do not really understand so much of what we are memorizing. But then after, when we go to the classes and we start understanding about it, we can always go back to the text and go back to that concept. So it helps a lot. We have like a reference, and then we have the commentary, and then we know what that word is meaning. But the main part of the studies, this is just like 30% of the studies. 20% is classes, 10% is memorization and reading. We do a lot of reading also. But the main part of the studies is debating. Debating is, we study dialectics from 1 to 5 years, depends on the intellectual preparation level of each student. And each monastery have different. Normally it would be around 3 years in the monastery where I was. But from 1 to 5 years is the period to learn how to debate. So we learn all the basis of dialectics. We learn how to bring one idea, how to go against another idea, how to analyze things, and how to debate, following the very, very specific rules of dialectics. And once we learn how to debate, the great part of the study is done by debating. So in the monastery we pass around from 3 to 6, 8 hours a day debating. So the greatest part of the day is dedicated to debating. And that's where we learn most of the things. Because first of all the students come together and they have had different teachers teaching the same subject. So they have different approaches, different points of view. And the way how the teachers teach is like first bringing in and explaining. We have the text that we follow, and then he explains us what is there, and then look, everything looks very clear, everything looks very easy to understand, but then he comes and he asks how this can be like this when that is like that. He puts a doubt on what he explained before. And it looked very clear, everything looked perfect, and then he brings a doubt. And then he starts debating in the class. Okay, what do you think? What do you think? Then you say your point of view. Then he will answer back why you are not correct. Then you need again to bring another point of view and build up different perspectives. And he will never give you the final answer, because there is none. We learn that everything can be seen from different perspectives, and when you change the perspective, the whole thing changes. And my experience is that when I learned something just by listening, I understood, it looked clear, but after a short time I forgot about it. When I learned something and I debated about it, which is the process of comprehension, where that knowledge became my own knowledge, then I never forgot it anymore. Some things we forget, but almost not. So the process of learning is, first we listen, then we comprehend, and then there is the third part, which is very important, which is to meditate or to familiarize, which is to take that knowledge and to put it into practice in our daily life, to make projects, to do things, to use it for something. I can learn a technique of building, I can listen to it, I can understand it, but there is a completely different thing when I start building. And I start to see that knowledge put into practice, and I see how it works, and I see the difficulties that come with it, and I have my own practices. And the more houses I build, the better my knowledge will be about it. Until there is a point where the knowledge is no more conceptual, it becomes like a flowing river. It's something that is spontaneous. That's the best knowledge. Okay? So, I believe that the process of education, we should take, first of all, when we teach, we need to be careful to have the knowledge, to have our own comprehension, and to have, at some extent, applied that knowledge to our own life. That's why technical explanations and teaching is more easy. When I need to teach how to read and write and to tell about history and to tell about geography or mathematics, that's more easy. But to build up a worldview and at the same time to give emotional education, it's more difficult, because how can I teach you to have less anger and to be more patient when I am showing to yourself that I am angry very easily? It's not going to work. Sorry. Because what happens? Let's say I go to my students and I show and explain them, anger is something that is very harmful to us and we shouldn't get angry because this and that reason. There is a whole process that we can go through. And then I say it's so important and virtuous to be patient and so on. Then some of them say something I didn't like or something else happened, and then I react with anger. Naturally, it takes away all the credibility of everything I've said. It's like a mathematics teacher that suddenly doesn't know how to make 2 plus 2. So, what's the challenge that we have? That you must realize what you want to teach. That's what makes a good teacher. Listening, gaining the knowledge, comprehending it, and applying it to your life. And the things that we have a deep understanding and experience, that's the things that we can give in the best way to others. Okay? I think it's quite clear, right? Okay? Not necessarily easy, but it's very important to follow on this way. So, together with that, there is another point, which is, when we talk about the worldview in which we live, there are 2 things that we need to understand before teaching a worldview. First of all, which is my own worldview, which is not obvious, because we are not used to thinking this way. Okay. And the other thing, which is maybe more easy but very important, not only to learn but to teach, is that we have a worldview. We live within a paradigm, and my paradigm will not be the same one as your paradigm. The worldview I have will never be the same worldview that you have. It can be similar, but will never be the same. And it's not because your worldview is different that you are wrong. Because the problem that happens very often is that we have our own worldview, inevitably, but we think that our own worldview is the actual reality. So when someone else has a different worldview, he is wrong. And that's ignorance. They are right and wrong. Sure, it exists. Okay? But within the right, there are so many possibilities. So based on this, I believe it's very important for us to bring in this aspect of having a worldview, understanding that I have one worldview, trying to understand how our own worldview was built up. And this is a study that maybe some of you would like to do in a better way. I tried by myself, I didn't dedicate so much time for that. But when we do the Buddhist studies, there is a part in which we talk about the constructed view and the world view that we have. And there it is the teachings up to today actually are based on the world view that existed in India 1,500 years ago. Which is very different from the one that we have nowadays in the world, Western world, right? So what is the constructed view that we have? What is the world view that we have? So by doing a very rough, superficial analysis, I got to three main influences that we have in our worldview. Okay? Which I think can be done in a much more detailed and deepened way, and I think it's a very good research to be done. The first influence that we have in our worldview is from the monotheistic religions. We have our background, which comes from the Judaico-Christian tradition, monotheistic religion. Second influence that we have, just one thing, having an influence doesn't mean it is good or bad. It's just the influence that we have on our own worldview. So we have a strong influence coming from the religious, monotheistic religious view of what is reality, what is right, what is wrong, and so on. How things exist, where they come from, how is reality. We have a very strong influence which is coming from the so-called scientific view, but our scientific view, common scientific view, is completely outdated because we still live in the mechanicist system of Newton. True or not? That's the common view. That reality is only external, that the observer has no influence whatsoever, that everything is solid and in a mechanic way. That's the common view. Then maybe many of us, we go out, we make our own research and we start changing our view, but that's the common view. I got very clear this for myself one day when I was reading one article about a quantum computer. And I was reading about quantum computers. I like computers, I like technology and so on. I understand about quantum physics a bit because it's very, very similar to Buddhist view on reality. And I was reading to it, then it came to a point where a quantum computer is made not in a binary way. What's the binary system? 1 and 0, which means exist and don't exist, right? This is the mechanicist view. Or something exists or it doesn't exist, which looks logical, right? In the quantum view, it's a bit different. In quantum computer, it's made on qubits, which is quantum bits. The qubits are made of 4 possibilities and not 2. So, normal binary system is exist or don't exist. On or off, right? A quantum bits is made of 4 possibilities. Exists, don't exist, exist and don't exist at the same time, and a 4th one which I never understood, okay? And when I was reading that, I said, how can something exist and not exist at the same time? That's not possible. And that's when it became clear that I am within another paradigm. That sure, if I go on and I study and I go to the whole process, I will understand it. But our paradigm is based on the very strong mechanicist view of exist and don't exist. It's like this, it's like that, very based on material view and so on. Okay, from my very, very limited understanding, how can something exist and not exist at the same time? Basically, all the possibilities are there, and it depends on the observer which possibility is being chosen. Let's say, whatever, this object, it exists as a weapon, and it doesn't exist as a weapon at the same time. It depends on how you choose and how you use it. Okay? So, anyhow, I'm the worst person to explain this because I don't have so much knowledge about that, but the point is that we are influenced by our own monotheistic views, our mechanicist view, which is a very outdated view from the point of view of physics, but that's the most common view available. And we are very much influenced also, our worldview is influenced by the capitalist system. Okay. These are the three things that came out from, I did a very, very basic research, like reflection upon that. That's what came about. But if anybody would be interested, I say this in many places, hoping someone one day will do it. But if anybody would be interested to go on and make a deeper research on what are the bases and the main influences that are there on our own worldview, it would be something very interesting. Because then we can see, okay, this is my worldview. What is the worldview that I like to bring to this new generation? And here we have a problem. We can only share a worldview when we follow it and when we are within it. If we do not change our worldview, it will be very difficult for us to change the worldview of someone else and bring someone else to a different paradigm. So what is one of the greatest responsibility of a teacher? Being what he wants his students to become. Okay. So, it's not simple, but it's possible. And we need people with goodwill to do this. So in this sense, it comes here the fact that together with that, we can train our emotions. We can train the way how we do, how we relate to the world and so on. And based on this, gradually, we can share with others and show to them and give these techniques to them also. Okay? So, this is more or less the main points that I wanted to bring to you. Okay? And I would like to open for questions. Otherwise I continue talking and can go on to tomorrow, but better we open for some questions and then after we make a conclusion altogether. If there are any, right?
It's just good to
Now need some time to
some time. Yeah.
bring it down.
Yeah.
No? Because, okay, I will explain you one thing. In the meantime, you think about another question. Okay, one part of the mind listen, another part of the mind think of the question. Okay. So, there one thing which is very important for us to understand when we teach. First of all, who needs to adapt to who? The student needs to adapt to the teacher, or the teacher needs to adapt to the student? As a student, it's my duty to adapt to the teacher, but as a teacher, it's my duty to adapt to the student. Okay? And if we are teachers, our duty is to adapt to the students. If they do their duty or not, that's their problem, not ours, in this sense. In the same way, it's the one that helps that needs to adapt to the one that is being helped. Okay? It's the one that helps that needs to adapt to the needs and the capacities and the abilities of the one that is being helped, and not the other way around. If someone says, oh, I want to help him so much, but he never wants my help. He doesn't allow me to help him. It's me that I don't know which is the right way to reach and to help that person. So, in other words, whenever we teach someone, one of the very important things is that we must know the one that we are teaching. And we must respect him or her. So one thing, for example, when we teach kids or teenagers, the body is going through a whole process of hormones here and there. We need to understand what is happening in, and we need to respect the process that they are in. And we need to adapt to their needs and to their reality in order to be able to give to them and to guide them in the way how we want to be. So, saying it the same thing in other words, it is that I cannot teach you something if I do not speak your language. And most of the times, one of the roles of a teacher is being a translator, because the teacher we received the information and the education in one language, and the kids that we are going to teach one generation, 2 generations later, they speak another language. And I'm not speaking about English or Dutch. I'm talking about the way of thinking and the way of understanding and the way of communicating. We must adapt to them. I must explain it to you in a way you understand, and then by adapting myself to you, I can guide you on the way how I want it to become. But if I do not speak your language, I will never reach you. I can force you to learn this or that, but I will never reach you. So one of the very important things, and one of the very difficult tasks also, is because we can only understand those that are more similar to us. But we need to try to understand the others. And there is one thing which I have seen in all different cultures. I've seen in the monasteries in Tibet and in the Western world. The old people always say, in my time things were better. Okay? And the young people always say, the old do not understand me. This is common. That's how we have always seen. But our role, or your role as a teacher, is that of what? Learning to see the other, understanding the mentality, understanding the other, in order I can connect to you and I can guide you. So it requires great humility. It requires the humility of not being inferior, but of allowing the other to be himself and helping him by what he is to become something else. Teaching has a very particular aspect, which is very interesting. No? When we see that no one is able to give any new knowledge to anyone else. Truly, we cannot put anything in someone's mind. The only thing that we can do is to interact with the other person in a way that that person will use his own knowledge and experience combined with our interaction for him to understand something new. Education is, knowledge is constructed, is built up. But which are the bricks that are used? The one that the person have himself. What I can say, put one brick here, put the other one there, and I can somehow influence, but the bricks are the ones that the person already have. So if I do not understand what are the tools that you have, if I do not understand how you are, how can I show you how to do one thing or another? And then what we get? Clashes between generations. And this creates conflict. Please.
Yes, I was wondering, when you have this, you also have persons where you have no understanding and you don't understand them, but maybe when you have the connection, is it enough when you're a teacher? Mm-hmm. Because I have a lot of persons I don't understand, but where there is some connection and you try to understand, but maybe the worlds are too different, or you're curious and maybe they don't understand me. Is connection enough, in your opinion, when you're a teacher?
I believe that what makes a big difference is connection that is based on love. What happens is like this. When there is a person that I feel that this person loves me, and I trust that person, even though we do not understand fully each other, we are able to go together. Okay. And if I have a teacher and I understand, and the teacher is humble towards me, this naturally will make me to respect him. There is a Buddhist prayer which I read some time ago. I read it in Portuguese actually, but the meaning meant something like this. It says, may all beings I will adapt it a little bit, but it say like this: may everyone respect me and value myself. May all beings value me. And may myself value them more than what they value me. So what's the best match? When the students have a great respect for the teacher, and the teacher have an even greater respect for the students.
Even if you don't understand it.
Even if you don't understand fully each other, but the understanding is not necessarily technical. Okay, our mind, it's normal that my generation will think in a different way from other generation. I cannot get why you do things like this, you know. There are some things that simply will not fit in one's other mind. But in the moment that we feel that there is a connection which is based on trust, and in the moment that I feel that the other person have humility in front of me, doesn't want to impose something on me, but is there to guide me and have experience, and there is this connection, this makes a lot. Sure, still it's important for us to try to understand. But more than understanding, having this connection is even more important, I believe.
I don't really have a question, but I wonder about your opinion, because in the Dutch school system, we are basically forced into a direction with a curriculum, with a lot of mathematics, with a lot of writing, learning the language. How can teachers transfer your everything that you've told about love, about trust? How can they apply this in their daily practice? For instance, tomorrow.
As you were making this question, I remembered one video that I saw one time. It was of an American teacher saying hello to all the kids that were entering the class. You know, some of you may have seen this movie. And he was finding a specific way how to greet each one of the kids. Okay. So that's, for example, a very simple example in which he respects each one for what they are and creates a personal connection to each one of them. Okay? And sure, you need to go through the curriculum with all the mathematics, with all the geography, with everything else. That's okay. But you know each student's name. You look them into the eyes. You manifest love towards them. You care for them. This already makes a big difference. And then within that, it's important, like, okay, maybe in mathematics it's a bit more difficult, even though I think mathematics is one of the best subjects to teach philosophy, but that's another subject, okay? But the point which I want to come is like, maybe when teaching geography, when teaching history, when teaching language, we can put so much more within it. We can put so much of our own worldview that we want to share. We can put so much of the emotions we want to give. What is the direction that we want to give together with all of that? This is something that I believe it's possible inside. It's the way how we do very often more than the specific content also. Okay. So, something which I believe, and I don't know exactly how to put it into words, but is that when any one of us are with other people, very often the greatest agent of change, of influence on the other person, is not what is said, is not the content of what we teach, but is who we are. So, in the moment that we are present for the students with the whole of ourselves, and we become a reference, we become someone they trust, and at the same time we can give this exchange. Yes, we will teach the mathematics, we will teach the geography, we will teach whatever, the language, everything that is there, but most probably they will come for advice. Most probably there is a constant exchange of trust. And this is something that is so powerful in this whole process. And this, from that trust that is created, that we can help in the process of education of bringing that non-formal part of education, which is building up one's own character and building up one's own emotions and so on, which I hope one day will be part of the formal curriculum, which I think it's more than necessary. Okay? Specifically because of what we just said before. If the curriculum is made in order to fulfill the needs of the market needs people more emotionally stable. So this needs to be part of the curriculum. There are many techniques that could help with this, like neurolinguistics and so many other things that could be useful in these things. And the earlier we start, the better it is. But one more tool that I like just to share with you that I think is very powerful. And we have had some experience of this specifically in Brazil. We all made a foundation, and it's called Lama Michel Peace Culture Foundation. And one of the main objectives we have is to work through education. And we have gone, in Brazil we have a very difficult situation. Way more difficult than any country that I've seen in Europe. Because we have the public schools that are really, really, really violent and very bad level of education. And then we have the private schools that many times are as the best qualities that you can find. So there is this. It's one of the ways that there is a social difference that is so big. Anyhow, in the public schools there is a lot of violence. So what we have been doing is going to public schools and teaching the kids, and after the teachers also, how to meditate. And the results are wonderful. Okay. Because one of the problems that we have nowadays, and then I think this is a situation that we all find in our lives, and with the young people that are coming, the new generations, this is even worse, is there is an addiction to stimulation of the senses. Everything is fast. If we look from a neurological point of view, what happens? Whenever we see something new, we get a shot of dopamine. It gives pleasure. That's why traveling is so nice. Other reasons also, but we go to a new place, we see something new, look at that. It gives a sensation of pleasure. We see something that we never saw before, that we didn't expect to see, it gives pleasure. And if we look, what is happening with Facebook, with internet and all of this, a great part of it is what? News, new. Even we call news, no? Which is not knowing what is happening in the rest of the world, it's just a stimulation for the senses very often. Very often we really don't care what is happening. But it's just a matter of having more information. What's the problem of that? That through this addiction, it's taking away the ability to deepen oneself into understanding and knowledge. To be able to listen to others. Because everything is too fast, so I have no more patience. I heard about one study, which was made about the length of one class in a classroom. And how does it last one class in here in Holland normally? 45 minutes, 50 minutes?
Something like that, yes.
Around 50 minutes, right?
Yeah, yes.
This 50 minutes was the standard time of length of one class, which was based on a study, I don't know, in the 60s, whenever, on which they made a study of what was the medium time span that a kid could concentrate on a subject. Okay? They remade the same studies some years ago, and the result was something like 9 minutes. Okay? So you see, we have some problem. But what I experience, because I talked to kids many times, is when we really connect to them, then we can say 2 hours talking to them, and we can keep their attention. If we do not connect to them, then it doesn't work. But what I want to say is that with this high quantity of stimulation that we have, the ability just to be with oneself, it's getting each time less and less. And this is quite dangerous. So meditation is one of the tools that helps us to bring back this ability just to be with ourselves and to develop this stability which is so necessary, concentration that is so necessary.
Is that a guide meditation with children are?
It's done with a guided meditation. Very, very simple. Even in the schools we don't call it meditation, because in Brazil there is a great part of evangelics, and they are against meditation. They say meditation is something from the devil. So it's not possible to call it meditation, because the idea is that meditation means to empty the mind. If you empty the mind, the devil comes in. So anyhow, each one has their own view. So the concept is that we call it technique for concentration and relaxation. It's the same stuff. But we simply call it technique for concentration and relaxation, and it works well. So what do we do basically? First, there is an explanation to the kids, explaining what is meditation. There is a very simple experiment that we can do, very visual, that is coming from Buddha's teachings. If you take a jar of water and you put sand inside, okay, and this is representing our mind. This jar, our brain, our mind. And then suddenly you mix the water with the sand. This is our mind when we're having too many thoughts. And then if you stop mixing and just let the mind be, what happens slowly? The sand comes down and the water gets clear. That's what happened to our mind when we come down. Okay. We did this meditation with kids from all ages. Okay. When they are a little bit, depending on the age, many of them, they had better grades in their studies, and it helped in many different ways. But the basic thing is that then you just help the kids to sit down, relax a little bit the shoulders, sit in a correct posture, which means the back straight possibly. Okay? And then just start breathing. Close the eyes a little bit and learn to observe one's own breath. Inhale and exhale. And any other thought that comes to the mind, don't follow it. Bring back the attention to the breath. Okay? Can focus on the nostrils or just bring the attention to the present moment. It is not easy, but it's not impossible. Okay? We had kids that were teaching their parents how to meditate. Okay? There are kids that in the beginning of the class, if the teacher was not doing the 10 minutes of meditation or 5 minutes of meditation, they were calling the teacher and said, "Oh, and what about the meditation today?" You know? So this is something that is so important, because also another thing, how does it happen in school? Finish one class, starts another, right? I remember when I was in school, I never went to school over 12 years old of age, okay? So my memory is that when finish one class, starts another, and very often it's a different subject, a different teacher, a different energy, a different approach. And maybe we are still busy with what happened just before, and then suddenly we need to close all of that and go to something new. So even just to do this 5 minutes of silence, of breathing, it helps, if not for other things, but it helps to make a division, to create the space for the new things that are going to come. Even for ourselves, we go between one meeting and the other. Wait, 1 minute. Breathe a little bit. Slowly it goes better. I'm not entering now into details about it, but there are so many people teaching about mindfulness. It has become some sort of a fashion. Good one, I hope. There are some aspects which are a little bit delicate, because meditation is much beyond mindfulness. It's not only mindfulness. There is one video that I gave, one speech last year or 2 years ago here in Holland. We have it on YouTube, about meditation beyond mindfulness, in which there is the explanation of what is mindfulness and what are the other aspects of meditation and so on. Okay? But if we just first train ourselves, then if you just go with the kids, sit down, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, give some explanation about how is meditation, what's the important. There is a lot of scientific data about meditation nowadays. Sorry if I put into these words, but for me science is our modern religion, because we follow without even questioning very often. So if it's scientifically proven, then you don't worry, that's okay. And there is a lot of scientific research made on the benefits of meditation. I have known one time one psychiatrist that he would put on his prescription, meditate 3 times a day. Breathing. And it's very powerful technique. So if you do this for a few minutes before start, and start with the small kids. There's no need to be afraid, oh, they are too small. No. I saw one time someone that was teaching the kids to breathe correctly, because the correct breathing is through the stomach. They will put the kids laying down, and one small teddy bear on the stomach of each one, and they need to put the teddy bear to go up and down. Because this is ways of helping this. And then, okay, bring the mind to the present moment. And this is, if you're able to share this with your students. My dream personally is that in education we would have meditation since kindergarten up to university. This, I think, would make such a big difference. Something so simple. This is one part. Then there's many other things which are necessary, but we don't need to go into everything today. But this is a tool that we all have, and you can apply. Something simple, something easy, that makes a big difference. Just sit down, breathe to the nostrils, bring the attention to the present moment. Any other thought that comes to the mind, don't follow it. Bring back the mind to the breath. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, that's more than enough. Another thing which I like to share also, check the time. Another thing that I like to share with you also as teachers, that it's very powerful, is the power of the way how we use our speech. That's, if you study neurolinguistics, you will see a lot of this. But the way how we use our words, the way how we use our speech, it's a very powerful way how to direct the mind. So helping the kids to speak in a certain way, we help the kids to shape their mind in a certain way. One of this concept, it became very clear to me reading this book, 1984. Many of you have read it. And in this book, forget about all the political aspects of the book. I'm talking about one specific thing, which is the newspeak. In the book there was a language which was called the newspeak. And the concept that was inside of it, what I understood when reading that, was that they were saying, okay, it's a language that every year the vocabulary becomes smaller and smaller, and that we will take away the words that represents concepts that we don't want people to have. Because if people don't have words to represent a feeling or a concept, gradually that concept will fade away. Okay? So I try to use that on my own benefit. So there are some words which represent concepts which I think very useless and sometimes harmful. The first one of them is the word if. Very small word, very powerful. Whenever we say if related to the past, if I had done this, if I had done that, this would be different, that would be different, what if. The true conclusion is, I have no idea what would have happened if. Okay? I will just give you the example when I understood this, so by an example it helps to remember this. I was with my sister, I needed to go to do a vaccination of yellow fever, My sister, where is São Paulo, my sister asked me, should we go by car or by subway? And I told her, we go by car. 40 minutes, 45 minutes of traffic to get to the place. 40 minutes to find a place where to park the car. 10 minutes to do the vaccination. And another 45 minutes to go back home. Because São Paulo is a terrible city from the traffic perspective. So my sister came when we were on the way back on the car, and she a little bit complaining. She said, oh, you see, if we would have gone by subway, now we would have already been home and we could be watching a movie. I told her, it's true, but what if we would have gone by subway and you would have fallen down and broke your arm? Now we would be in the hospital. What if we would have gone by subway and someone would have stolen my bag? Now we would be in the police station. So remember one thing, after if, anything can come. Anything. So what I did was I started cutting the word if from my own vocabulary, mainly related to the past. So what happened is what happened. This is what we have. We can interpret it in a different way, we can learn something out of it, but this is what I have. And the question is not what would have happened if, the question is what am I going to do now with what I have? Sure, I learn from the present to build a future. That's important. But I don't stay looking backwards and saying, oh, how things could have been. Because I have no idea whatsoever. Another word that I stopped saying is, you said this. Because I truly have no idea what you said. I only have idea of what I understood. The only thing I know is what I heard and what I understood. What you really meant, I have no clue. So we don't say anymore, you said. We say, I understood this. What did you mean? Maybe we didn't understand each other. We already take away a lot of problems. We take away the if and take away you said, already many problems are gone. And another thing which I stopped saying also is, this is this, that is that. I prefer to say, this is what it looks for me. According to me, it's like this. But necessarily it doesn't need to be like this.
As a teacher, I stopped saying, do you understand me? Did you understand me? Because that's not, do you have some questions? It's not about what I'm giving to them.
Yes.
Did you understand me? Yeah.
It's also one thing that I've seen, one of my teachers, he did it very well. It was, he would not ask if we understood. After finishing, he will make questions to us and make us think about what he had just taught, and from that he would understand if they understood us, if we understood him or not. That's another way which also I think is very useful.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I think these are some of the things which I wanted to share with you. Okay. And I think time-wise, we are on time, correct? So, I like to make a conclusion, which is, first of all, believe in yourself, because each one of us have a very big potential. And what we need to do, first of all, is by loving ourselves and loving others. Remember that the basis is to love others, and specifically with your own students. Sure, you need to have a good understanding about the mathematics that you are going to teach. This is no doubt. But this you already know. And this we already have many methods to check and to do and so on. But other than that, please remember, create a good bond with the student. Understand each other. This is something. And the more we give, the more we receive. Generosity is one of the greatest gifts that we can have. And from all the forms of generosity, there is material generosity, there is the generosity of giving love, there is the generosity of giving knowledge, there is the generosity of giving protection, of helping others to avoid their own suffering. As a teacher, you can practice a lot of generosity, and this is something that gives a lot of joy for ourselves. Okay? And with that, remember one thing. We always need to have a very high objective. Believe in an utopia. See every kid's potential. See the potential of where we want to go, what we want to do. Have a very high objective. Place the objective very high, with a very low expectation. The difference is, the expectation is when we put that objective within a time frame, with a when and how. I want that. When will it happen and how will it happen? I don't know. That's why I need a third part, which is high objective, low expectation, and constant effort. That's how things happen. There is no result without effort. Never. I think we all experience that in one level or another. So when we start seeing what we want to be, how we want to share what we want, it takes time, it takes effort, and we are one small part in the whole, but that's what we can do, and that's already very, very wonderful. And there is no other way around. The only way to change the world is changing every individual that is in the world. That's the only way. So if we see things that we don't like in our society, what can we do? Relate ourselves with 1, 2, 3, 10, 50, hundreds persons, and gradually be an agent of change in their lives by interacting with them. The only thing we can do with others is interact with them in the best way as we can. But we do not only interact with words, we interact with the whole of ourselves. So that's what we bring to others. Okay. So I like to conclude with one phrase which I always remember, because it is something that have always accompanied me. And because of all my defects, one of the biggest one is my laziness. And the phrase goes like this. I will say first in Tibetan. Chego chego samne nishu song, majung samne nishu song, aka samne nishu song, tedarngang ne longor trukchulong mise tompa sebe namdaring. In English, it would be something like that. Thinking of doing it, 20 years passed by. I couldn't do it, 20 years passed by. All why I didn't do it, 20 years passed by. In such way, 60 years passed by. That's the biography of an empty life. So if there is something that we truly believe is important, remember, it's never too late and never too early. It's the right moment to do it. But if we do not start today, it will simply never happen. Okay? So if there is anything from what we said today here that you think that it may be of any benefit, the only request I make is please put it into practice. Please do the best that you can to remember it again and again and to put it into practice. And make of my words your words if you truly believe in it. Okay? Thank you very much.